Have you ever had an interaction with a police officer that just felt, well, off? One minute it seems like a friendly chat, and the next, everything is tense and confusing. It turns out there's actually a hidden logic behind how officers communicate. And today, we're going to break it all down.
So let's start with a scenario that officers themselves have talked about. Picture this. You're talking with an officer. Things are going okay. You're building a bit of a rapport. The conversation feels natural. Maybe you even share a laugh. And then, just like that, in an instant, the entire tone shifts.
You're just left there thinking, wait, what just happened? Why the sudden change? This very question is the puzzle that a couple of researchers, Perfecta, Delgado, Oxholm, and Glaser, wanted to solve. So they interviewed dozens of officers, and what they found is pretty fascinating.
And there it is. The friendly chat? It wasn't really a chat at all. It was a tactic, a tool. According to this officer, the decision to arrest had already been made. The whole conversation was just a stall, a way to wait for backup to arrive. This right here shows that police communication is not always what it seems on the surface.
So, how do we explain this huge gap between what an officer says and what they actually intend? Well, the researchers knew they had to look deeper to get inside the internal logic that guides an officer's words and actions in the first place. They focused on this key idea called core narratives. Now, you can think of these as the mental scripts or the internal stories that officers are running in their heads to make sense of any given situation. An officer's core narrative, whether they see themselves as a guardian or a warrior or something else entirely, that's what's going to dictate the way they decide to communicate. And what's really amazing is that these internal stories aren't just random. The research actually uncovered a super powerful framework, kind of like a compass that maps out all police communication into 4 very distinct modes. And this whole compass, this entire framework, is built on just 2 fundamental questions that shape every single interaction an officer has. Okay, so the first dimension is all about intention. Is the communication a means to get to some other goal, like, say, stalling for time or trying to gather information? Or is the conversation itself the actual end goal, a real attempt to just talk and connect with someone? And the second dimension is about the outcome. At the end of the day, does the interaction build a bridge of trust and understanding between the officer and the public, or does it end up breaking that connection, creating more distrust and resentment, no matter what the officer's original intention was? So when you plot those 2 things against each other, intention and outcome, you get this. This is the framework. 4 distinct modes of communication: advocacy, cover, connection, and withholding. It turns out basically every police interaction falls into one of these 4 boxes. Let's dig into them using real-world examples from the officers themselves. All right, so let's explore these 4 different styles, because seeing them in action, hearing them described in the officer's own words, is what really makes this whole thing click. First up, let's talk about cover. This is that stalling tactic we saw at the very beginning. The communication is a means to a tactical end, and that hidden motive almost always breaks trust as soon as it comes to light. Man, this quote from an officer really shows you the real cost of using cover. The person feels betrayed, right? And that bridge of trust is just instantly gone. The officers know this tactic is a double-edged sword. Sure, it might keep them safe in the moment, but it causes some serious long-term damage to the relationship. Next up is advocacy. This is also a case where communication is a means to an end, but here the goal is actually to build a bridge. The officer's core narrative is kind of like being an educator or an ambassador. They're basically doing PR to try and improve the police's image. You can totally see advocacy in action with this one. An officer took the time to explain their tactics to a bystander who was really angry. The goal wasn't just to talk. It was to change her mind. It's a strategic move, right? To build goodwill, one person at a time. So the third mode is called withholding. Now, this one's a little different. Here, the decision not to share information is the whole point. It's not a tactic to get something else. The act of withholding is the goal itself. And even though the officer might have really good ethical reasons for it, the result is often a broken interaction and a lot of public frustration. This quote just perfectly captures the dilemma. Here, the officer's core story is all about ethical duty. They have to protect the suspect's privacy, so they withhold information. And even though the family gets angry and the interaction totally breaks down, the officer is making a very conscious choice.
based on that internal narrative. And finally, we have connection. This is the one where communication is the goal, an end in itself, and its outcome is to build a really powerful bridge. It's not about tactics, it's not about PR, it's just about genuine human-to-human interaction.
Wow, this story is just incredible. So, during a really tense search warrant, an officer just started talking to a woman who was distraught because her mother had just died that morning. And just through simple conversation, the entire situation transformed. She saw the person, not just the uniform. I mean, that's the power of connection. So, what does this all mean? What's the big takeaway here? Well, these four modes, they're not just academic labels. Every single day, with every single interaction, officers are making a choice, whether they realize it or not, to either build a bridge or put up a wall with the community they're supposed to serve.
And this really gets to the heart of it, doesn't it? The cover narrative, it reinforces that power imbalance and it actively breaks trust. But the connection narrative does the exact opposite. It creates a mutual exchange that can temporarily shift that power dynamic, putting both the officer and the citizen on a more equal footing, even if it's just for a moment.
And that leaves us with a really powerful final thought. Some research suggests that up to 98% of police work is just verbal communication. Think about that. It is their most used tool. So the next time you have one of those interactions that feels off, you might actually have a framework to understand why. And it really makes you wonder what would change for officers and for all of us if the default mode for that tool shifted from being tactical to being relational. What if the goal was always simply connection?